Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon DeRejo from Creamer Media. Welcome to today's webinar on Women in Business, where a panel of South African businesswomen will unpack how to grow the role and presence of women in South African business. Today's webinar is sponsored by Metskill, the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone, AB InBev, Amos, Engie, and Women in Mining South Africa. We thank them for making this event possible. Before we begin, please be aware that we have enabled the Q&A function, so please post any questions into the Q&A box. You'll find this on the panel at the bottom of your screen. The facilitator will pick out themes in the questions and answer as many of them as possible throughout the discussion. To encourage interaction, we've also enabled the chat function, so you can network with the panelists via the chat box. You'll also find this at the bottom of your screen, but remember, don't post any questions into the chat as we may miss them. You can post those into the Q&A. Please be aware that we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending the recording to you when it's available. We're also streaming the webinar live to YouTube and we'll share the link in the chat shortly. Today's webinar will be facilitated by Lael Bethlehem, Chief ESG Officer at Sedibelo Resources, a mining company with PGM assets in the Northwest and Limpopo provinces. Lael has worked in various sectors of the economy, including forestry, renewable energy, affordable housing, and development finance. She started her career as a researcher in the trade union movement and later served as a senior public servant in local and national governments before moving to the private sector. Lael will facilitate the discussion with our esteemed panel, which includes Rebecca Sands, the Managing Director of Metskill, Simangele Mvelase, CFO of Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone, Raksha Naidoo, Chairperson of Women in Mining South Africa, and Nolitha Fakude, President of Minerals Council South Africa. Unfortunately, our panelist from the National Business Initiative, Shamila Subramani, is unfortunately unavailable. I'll hand over now to our facilitator, Lael Bethlehem, to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, Lael.
Thanks, Shannon. Hello, everybody, and what a pleasure to be part of this webinar. You know, every year when Women's Month comes around, it gives us a chance just to reflect on the problems that we have as women, to reflect on the challenges that we face, to reflect on how we can support each other, but also, I think importantly, to reflect on how far we've come. When you think back, maybe a generation, maybe two, the difference in working life for women is extraordinary. And there has been a sea change in corporate life in South Africa, in the public service. I remember when I was a young public servant in the mid-1990s, there were so few women in the public service at that time. And now you find women taking up really senior roles all over the public service, in government, obviously at the highest levels. And similarly, I think in the corporate sector, we are really honored today to be among women who are managing directors, CFOs, chairpersons of huge international corporates. So we have a long way to go, but honestly, great strides have been made. And I think the purpose of today's webinar is to think about how we build on that and how we take it all further. So welcome to everybody who's joined us. Great to see a really good turnout. And I'm so looking forward to the discussion. So Rebecca, we're going to start with you. Rebecca, you work in a very, very interesting sector that also has a great impact on the lives of women because of its role in creating the skills that women need to succeed in the working environment. First of all, can you tell us a bit about your company and about the role that you play?
Thank you, Lael. Thanks for having me. Yes, so Metskill are a training company and I'm a metallurgist by profession. I started in the industry in 1986, so that's quite a long time ago, as a learner official. And I was surprised to find myself as one of the only female people around in my environment. Over the years, I got to really enjoy skills development and training. And 20 years ago, Metskill was born. We provide occupational qualifications for people who are working on the plants and in the laboratories on the mines. So instead of taking off or taking a sabbatical and going to study, You can get your qualification while you're at work. Also, we recognize skills of people that have been working in the industry for a number of years. And so they will get competency certificates in the areas that they work. So very rewarding and very satisfying. And really good to see an increasing number of women in the environment and carrying out these traditionally male-orientated jobs.
Amazing. You mentioned that you're a metallurgist and that when you started out, there were very few women metallurgists. I think even today, it's not a field in which you often meet women. But can you tell us a little bit more about the kinds of technical skills that have changed over the years? The kinds of skills where you now see women, where perhaps one never used to. And could we ask you also to comment particularly about the rise of Black women in these more technical spheres?
Yes, absolutely. So obviously, in the last couple of decades, automation has played a role in removing some of the tasks from the very physical environment that you find on the plants. But it is still really a physical job. There's still several skills that are needed where you need strength, and you need to be able to get dirty, maybe be in an environment which is, sort of seen as uncomfortable for females. We've seen a tremendous growth in the number of Black women in metallurgy, which I'm very excited about. A lot of bright young minds coming out of not only university, but also ladies that are coming in at the operator level and learning the job from grassroots as assistants, as attendants, and building up their practical skills, which is fantastic. So did I answer all of your questions, Lael?
Yeah, I think you did, Rebecca. And I want to just follow up with a question about the consciousness of young women coming into the industry, because I think one of the barriers perhaps to women getting into these technical jobs, and as you say, into these quite physical jobs, is because young women coming out of, say, high school may not see themselves doing a job like that. It just may not be in their consciousness that this is a job also for women. How do we go about shifting those perceptions, and are they shifting already?
Yes, there are. There is actually a very nice channel, a learnership opportunity for people who haven't worked in the industry. So we have a lot of our large companies who are running community development programs where these learnerships are provided. And we do get a lot of ladies who join through that channel. And I think, a lot of the time it's also necessity. You find people who need jobs, who haven't been able to find work anywhere else, and they end up in this environment that they probably never dreamed that they would start in. And luckily, a lot of the time, they seem to adapt and enjoy it. So there are definitely...
Fantastic. And it's wonderful to hear that these areas are becoming slowly. Is something that's happening, and clearly it's not enough for women to only be enthusiastic, or for women only to really want to do well. Part of empowerment is to have these hard skills and to be able to really come in into an environment with skills that they can prove themselves, because we all know that proving yourself in a mining environment is always part of the job. And on that note, could I ask you what advice you might have for women who want to succeed in business, reflecting now perhaps not only on the mining industry, but if you think also about your own journey and now being a senior person in business. Could you reflect on your own journey and perhaps share some advice with us that might be of use to others?
Certainly. I think the best advice I was ever given is when I was thinking about starting a company, somebody said to me, well, what are you good at and what do you love? So I thought about that. And at the time, I enjoyed training. I enjoyed interacting with people and sharing knowledge. So that was something that I think was really stood me in good stead. You need to be resilient, especially in our environment. I think most South Africans are resilient, and we certainly have had so many challenges that are thrown at us. And I think women in general often feel that they have to prove themselves more than men in business, so we work quite a bit harder and try and be that much better, because that's the impression that we get, that we actually do need to be better, if you like. So I think for that to happen, you need to be able to enjoy what you do and have a passion for it in the first place. Otherwise, it's going to be terribly hard.
Right, especially over the course of a long career. Levels of enthusiasm must not flag. Just a last question for you, Rebecca, if I may, and we may also hopefully come back to you as we get into the Q&A a bit later. But could I ask you to reflect on whether there's been a person in the course of your career that really perhaps gave you a hand up in the process of building your career, or somebody who helped you out or encouraged you or empowered you, and perhaps we can all learn something from that experience?
Well, I've been lucky enough to have many people who've helped me on my journey. You will find, and a lot of people in the mineral processing industry and probably in the mining industry as well are very open to mentor and to give advice and to share how they got to where they are. I have a very good friend who's a consultant in the mineral processing industry who's always willing to lend me their ear and give me advice, technical problems as well as developing my business. And then also I've recently been using Bettina Simmons, who's a business coach, and she's helped us a lot, not only me, but my company as well, giving very sound advice on ways to develop our business and ways to work together better, leadership skills, some of maybe the softer skills that we need and we forget about along the way. So a lot of people, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Really, really nice to hear about your business and a bit about your own journey as well. And I hope we'll be able to come back to you in the Q&A as well.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to move on now to Simangele and Mvelase, who is from the Richards Bay IDZ. Simangele, great to have you with us. And great to have a representative of an IDZ. I think not everybody knows about what the IDZs do, and particularly the Richards Bay one, which I think is a pretty busy and an important IDZ, such an important part of our industrial geography, if I can put it that way, the Richards Bay area. So Simangele, could you tell us, just to start, a bit about what you do, a bit about the IDZ and your role in particular?
Thank you so much. Greetings once again to everybody, all the lovely ladies that have connected to this webinar. My name, as you have indicated, is Simangele Mvelase. Professionally, I'm a chartered accountant. I hold a position of a CFO, and I'm a director, an executive director of the company. It's a very interesting company that I work for. We are in Richards Bay, a region within the KZN province. In full, our company name is Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone. We are a special economic zone. What we do as the company is to ensure that we attract investments, investor projects locally as well as from abroad. We have key sectors that we focus on. That is our focus. We do have interest in others, but our key focus that supports the mandate of this company, or our mandates basically that of ensuring that we are one of the contributors into the economic growth of our country, South Africa, playing an important role within the region. So basically, the key sectors that we focus on is that of minerals beneficiation, because we believe that one of the turning points as this country is to ensure that with the current minerals that we are such a rich country in terms of resources.
Yes.
But what we've found over the years is that there is largely an export of our raw materials into other countries where they take our gems and convert them into usable products, and then we are at the last end, of the supply chain where we buy now the completed products. So we're one of those companies that are saying, let's flip things around. Let's start as a country ensuring that with the current resources that we have the necessary skills, to convert our raw materials into usable products and improve our exports in terms of our products. What does that do? It ensures that we are able, to grow our companies. We're able to ensure that the small companies, the medium companies have got, different opportunities to grow within the space. There are other areas like the energy space. We know what's happening in the energy space. We very much are role players there, ensuring that the investors that have got projects in the energy space are supported. How do we support these different industries? By letting out, we have pieces of land where we ensure that we develop them as a landlord. I would say we are a landlord largely. We develop them such that it is ready for the investor to come and construct their factories, their plants, their top structures, so that they are able to beneficiate or manufacture their products for their different clientele. So that's largely what we have an interest in, and by that we know also that there are different job opportunities, for people that within the area as well as from outside our area, ensuring that we improve those different skills that are required by this country. So that's what just briefly what the company that I work for is responsible for. Maybe let me end here because it's a lot.
It's a lot. It is. And actually, Simangele, I visited the Richards Bay IDZ a few years ago, and I must say it was a very inspiring visit, because I could see that the infrastructure that you provide really does create a platform. I can say even physically a platform for investment projects. And also, of course, there's a regulatory environment in the IDZs, which makes investment easier. So I think these IDZs really are a crucial part of our economy. And, there's a term that I think, in fact, Martin Creamer often uses this term, and that is the term the real economy. And one of the things I love about being in the mining industry is that you are so much part of the real economy. You're not talking, policy papers and things that are maybe theoretical. You're right in there, making investment happen in a practical way. Simangele, I want to just focus on the fact that you are, as you say, a chartered accountant and a CFO. I think I've noticed over the years that in the field of accounting, there has been a real effort made by the people who run the profession to empower women, because I think that one sees large numbers, reasonably large numbers of women in senior levels in the accounting sector. And I've always found, in whatever environment I've worked in, that there are senior accounting professionals around who are women. They're not always at the top of the pile, and I think that's a challenge that we still face as women, is that we're there in the environment, but we're not necessarily in the most senior roles. But you are in a very senior role as a CFO. Could I ask you just to reflect on your own profession and the extent to which women are coming through, the extent to which Black women are coming through. How do you think your profession is doing in promoting women?
Thank you for that question. It's a very long journey that you take as a person, first and foremost, to qualify as a chartered accountant. So it just starts with you as a person. I think the focus must also be inward looking versus what is out there. It starts with you, ensuring that is this what you are looking for? Is this what you want to achieve? Because getting there, it's a very rough journey. I won't say there are specific programs for women. That is whilst you are studying, into articles, writing the exams to ensure that you qualify as a chartered accountant. But definitely there has been support in terms of if there are any, assistance in terms of tutors, a specific subject lecturers whilst you are studying towards becoming a chartered accountant that are offered in the different accounting firms as well. Ladies are supported in terms of ensuring that they are given those opportunities to lead audit in terms of auditing their clients. They are given also equal chances to participate in secondments where you go overseas, depending if your company offers such programs. So we definitely see support coming from there, ensuring that our women are exposed in different opportunities and ensuring that the actual industry plays an integral role in terms of growing our women. SAICA, who is a professional body, also they've got different programs in place that also just support women in ensuring that their skills are improved on a regular basis. So that's the support that I see coming from the actual body, which is very much appreciated, ensuring that we are able to elevate our ladies. It is not easy in our company. We are a team of 6 executives, senior management, but in the senior level, it's the 2 of us that are ladies. So it's not easy as a woman to get to those positions. It's true, like Rebecca has said, you need to prove yourselves because you come to different environments where, they say, oh, a woman, we do still have those people who believe men can do a better job. So you do have to ensure that you give an extra effort in terms of proving yourself so that you are able to be ready. And once you are given that opportunities of being appointed because you qualify, you do the work, you step up and you do the work, you ensure that you perform. So there are those programs that are offered by our professional body, which we definitely support. And even in our company, we do have different programs where we support our women, which we can share during this platform.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simangele. And, I must say, I think that for young women coming up through the financial industry, financial services industry in particular, and women working, at the coalface in the accounting sector, it is very encouraging to see role models like yourself, to see women who are CFOs. And to show that women can be in these positions and women can succeed very well in these positions. Perhaps I can just ask you one question about the role of what goes on in the household, because it's one thing to be getting an opportunity at work and to be encouraged at work. But as women, we also have responsibilities at home. And perhaps if we don't have the right kind of support at the household level, then it's also not easy to succeed. So the workplace is not just a place, by itself. It's part of society. What advice can you give women who might be up and coming about how to, balance our roles as professionals, our roles as homemakers, what support we need at home in order to be able to succeed at work?
Most definitely. I think we need to reach out to one of the good characteristics about being a woman. We are jugglers. Embrace that as a woman. It will go a long way. Yes, there is a huge role that we play in our different households, whether you a sister, a mother, a wife. So we have huge roles that we play in our household, and it's very important to balance the two. Whilst you're trying to prove yourself and ensure that you make your mark in the career or in the profession that you are in, also don't leave your family behind. It's very important to strike that balance. How you do that is to manage your time very properly. Support is definitely important, and especially coming from family, we have different, dynamics in terms of the family space. Family does not only, lie with your biological family. You can even extend to your friends, those who are willing to support you, because you cannot do it on your own. You need that support. I was lucky enough when I was still starting towards being a chartered accountant. My husband was very supportive. He was there with I remember I had my first child whilst I was studying, so it was not easy. When I was doing my CTA, I remember there was this one time, because I was losing that balance, where my husband was like, you know what, you need to at least give us one weekend. I was right there, in the middle, making sure that I have to, have this. And I was just losing track of that. So you need those people who, whilst they are supporting you to reach your goals, but also remind you, to say, there are these other people that, need you in your life. You've got children, you've got family, they also need you. So just ensure that you have such people in your life that are supporting you to uplift you as a holistic person, not just a career woman, but a sister, a mother, a wife. If you are married, down the line, unfortunately, our paths split, but we are still friends. He's now an ex-husband, but we're still friends, so we co-parent. So you need that. If you don't have that, reach out to your friends, who will offer that kind of support. If you've got important work to do or whatever conferences that you need to attend, make sure that if you've got kids, you've got that support people that you can rely on, that you trust. Obviously, that's also you give the same sort of support with, and not be, a person on the receiving end only. Make sure that, you open up yourself, because if you want to do things yourself and no one not reaching out for help, one way or the other, you will reach a breaking point, and we don't want that. You need to make sure that you ensure that you are a healthy person emotionally and physically. So you need that support. It actually helps you even in the working space. If you are a balanced person, you are able also to understand, those different areas that might not be within the working environment that contributes to your colleagues or your subordinates that reports to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Simangele, and thank you for sharing that with us. It seems to me that in the course of a career, and again, in the course, hopefully, of a long career, because what I often see is women who come into the workplace as young women, and then perhaps after they have their kids, then they exit the workplace. And I think one of our jobs is to encourage people to see that you can have kids and be in the workplace, or you can come back even if you took a break. So that we encourage long careers and not only women to be in the workplace as young women. But that does really mean that we need the support of our partners. We need the support of our families. If we're parents, we need the support of our co-parents, and that we need to insist on ensuring that we're not doing those roles alone. So thank you so much, Simangele, for sharing everything that you have so far, and we hope to come back to you just now in the Q&A. I can see that there's a particular question for you in the Q&A, and we'll come back to that just now. So I want to come now to Raksha Naidoo from WIMSA. So how wonderful, Raksha, to be able to talk to you on a day like this, because you deal with the question of women in mining, not just during August, as many people do, but every day. And, you know, your role is, in fact, to promote women in mining as part of a broader effort within the mining sector. So could we again ask you just to start off by telling us a little bit about what you do, how you've come to do that role, and perhaps a little bit about the challenges that you face.
Sure. Thanks so much, Lael. So Women in Mining South Africa is a nonprofit, and we're the only registered nonprofit organization focused specifically on women in mining in South Africa. We've been around for, I think it's 13 years now, and it was started many, many years ago as I think more than anything, as a space of support. I think over the last 13 years, the organization has grown and evolved to such a wonderful place that we're involved in so many different aspects of how we can actually stick to the vision that we have of creating a better world for women in mining and through mining. WIMSA is my passion project. I mean, my day job is something completely different, and I wish I could do it all day, every day, but unfortunately, life doesn't demand that one. And I'm sure Nolitha probably feels very similarly. So as part of my day job, I work in the mining industry, and I work for an organization that produces certified reference materials that mining laboratories use for quality control. But I got involved in WIMSA because I just have a passion for wanting to give back and help people. I have a particular passion around mentorship, and I first volunteered my time and wanted to get involved in WIMSA from a mentorship angle. And as I got more involved in what they were doing, I was asked to join the committee, which I absolutely loved. And we were involved in so many different projects. And ultimately then I was able to, get to a space where I was offered the role of chairperson. Something that we do a lot of that's incredibly rewarding is the interaction with women on a day-to-day basis in all different aspects of the mining industry. We hear a lot of horror stories. We hear a lot of rewarding stories. We hear a lot of different engagement on things that, I think we need to be having a lot more honest and open conversations with each other about, so that we can learn from it and actually create a far stronger industry for women to thrive in. I think that, we are, one organization in South Africa that's catering specifically to, the South African context and the challenges that we uniquely find in South Africa. Because discrimination, as many of us experience, yes, it comes from a gender perspective, but it also comes from a cultural perspective, the racial perspective, an age perspective, social standing perspective. And each of those are so unique as well and impact how we actually succeed in our careers, in our career journey. So with the work that we do at WIMSA, we try and cover a variety of different challenges. I think, there are so many different things, and I wish we could tackle all of them, but it's actually really difficult to do so. We experience a lot of stuff, and we focus our attention on mentorship and empowerment from that perspective. We've got an incredible mentorship program that we launched 2 years ago, and it's targeted at sort of like your entry to mid-level management women. And we look at how we can help empower them with some of the, I hate to use it, but some of the softer skills that women probably need in terms of trying to find their own confidence, deal with inner critics and imposter syndrome, and all of those other things that actually end up clouding our focus and our vision and become our own personal prohibitors in terms of succeeding in our careers. And our program has been so successful. We get an overwhelming response every year, and we're looking to continue to expand that to different stages of women in their careers as well. We run a variety of campaigns around diversity and inclusion, around gender-based violence. We do a lot of work in terms of how we can try and connect mentees and mentors in the industry, as well as just basically creating in platforms and discussions such as this to actually start speaking some of our truths so that we can actually learn from each other. And we found that the best interaction and form of learning is when we start discussing things with one another, because it's the best way to learn. And that's a lot of where our focus is. You've highlighted the fact that Rebecca is a metallurgist and Simangele is an accountant by profession. Something we created last year was a career booklet, which we use to take back into schools, where we look at trying to get young girls excited about the careers in STEM and how they can join the mining industry and what the different faces of women in mining look like. I think all four of us here have completely different careers in the industry, and it's about how can we showcase that to young girls And how do we get them excited about the different opportunities? Because you can be an accountant and still thrive in the mining industry or in the financial sector or in telecoms or wherever. But sometimes, there's a block with young girls in terms of understanding it. So we do a lot of work in terms of outreach to go into schools, speak to young girls, get them excited, bring them into the industry, and then ultimately how we all work together to retain people in this industry by creating safe workspaces such that people can thrive and be more successful.
Well, thank you, Raksha, for reminding us of the importance of retention, because it's not only about bringing people into the industry, but about keeping them there. And keeping people in the industry, keeping women in the industry is very much about women's lived experience of being in the industry. And if women are experiencing being undermined, if women are experiencing sexual harassment, for example, then that's a very difficult thing to live with, and then people tend to just quietly exit the industry. So the retention of women is, I think, so important, and something you've reminded us of. You've also reminded us of the importance of what goes on in our own minds, of our own consciousness. And I think this is such a crucial part of women's empowerment. Women's empowerment is not only about things that happen externally, but it's about what we say to ourselves. It's about what we say to each other. It's about how to know that we belong in the industry, that we belong in the workplace, that we have every right and just as much right as anybody else. And I've often been struck, if you go back to some of the writings of the very, very early feminists, feminist theorists, women like Germaine Greer, for example, those insights are all there. And it's so many years since that was written, but it's still such an important aspect. And also to reflect on the writings of people who've written about consciousness in relation to race. If one reads the writings of a person like Steve Biko, I think there's so much for women to learn from the thinking that has also been done about race and consciousness. So thank you, Raksha, for reminding us of all of that. Let me just ask you a question about the industry. How do you think we're doing? How do you think we're doing in relation to the empowerment of women? Do you see, it's really great to remember that it used to be illegal for women to go underground and not so long ago. So clearly we've made great strides. But how do you think we're doing? Are we making good progress?
So I think Nolitha is probably better placed to answer from a statistical perspective, because Minerals Council do amazing work in terms of actually generating the numbers. But from my perspective, where I'm sitting as a WUMSA point and as a female in this industry, I think we're getting there. I think we're probably doing a lot better than we probably give ourselves credit for. I think we've made a lot of good strides forward, but then every now and then there are situations that probably take us back a little as well. I think that sometimes we, if I have to be honest, I think it's probably one of the most exciting times to be a woman in mining, because we're at the forefront of trying to make real tangible change. And I think with the more industry leaders that exist, that come out there and actually start speaking about this and start sharing their truths and their realities, we can actually make a far bigger impact as well as we move forward. I mean, a couple of years ago, I joined the industry about 20 years ago, and I was one of 3 females on a processing plant when I started my career. And It was myself, it was a secretary, and it was a cleaning lady. And it was so strange for me to not see other women around. And I remember throughout my journey in the last 20 years, like a big struggle for me has been to try and find female leaders that I could actually resonate with and I could actually lean on and learn from and grow with, and all of those sorts of things. And now we're probably in a position where there are more and more female leaders that exist, which never existed before. I mean, somebody like Nolitha, for example, has been an icon and a role model in this industry for a very long time. I met Rebecca many years ago, and to learn that how she's taken her metallurgical skills and now become this incredible entrepreneur in this industry, it's so inspiring and it's so rewarding. But up until we don't actually learn about each other and learn from each other, it actually helps us propel ourselves forward as well, because it helped inspire me. And I think that we need to be having more conversations. We need, as women, to be sharing more about the realities of what we face every day, as well as some of the challenges that we've converted into successes, so that other women know that it is possible and it is an opportunity that we can make a success of. Because it is very difficult to, if you can't get the basics right sometimes, Lael, and it sounds like such a silly example, but if we don't have the right PPE for women, it's such a basic thing that sometimes we still can't get right. if there aren't proper change house facilities in place at mining houses and makes women feel insecure and uncomfortable, again, it's a basic right. You know, sexual harassment, gender-based violence, these are such huge topics that we as leaders have to do a lot more of in order to make women feel safe. Because if we really want to see true change and see the numbers of women increasing, not just from a leadership perspective, but also from the number of women in this industry, we've also got a duty to create a safe working environment for women to thrive in. And then an environment in which it fosters development, learning, skill set increases, all of those sorts of things. So whilst I think we're getting better because it's nice to see more and hear more of what's going on, I think we've still got a long, long, long way to go. But it's about what we all do together collaboratively to make that change. And I think, like, you know, Minerals Council have put out some really great goals and initiatives in terms of what we're getting to. And I'm sure Nolitha is going to speak about this, but it requires every single stakeholder to do their bit in order to move forward, right? So all of us have a role to play in being the change, I guess, ultimately.
Absolutely. Well, before moving on to Nolitha, because I think we've got so much that we want to hear from her, I want to just ask you, if I may, Raksha, to address a question that's come through on the Q&A from Rifmetswe Davids, who asks, is there a glass ceiling that's negatively affecting women in the business sector, as well as in prominent management positions? Glass ceiling, you know, the idea that there isn't necessarily any obvious barrier, but that nonetheless, the hidden barriers are there. Could you give us your thoughts on glass ceilings in the mining industry?
Yeah, I think the glass ceiling is totally real, and it exists physically, metaphorically, in our minds, all of it. It's definitely there. I think sometimes, you know, we end up putting up the ceiling ourselves because it becomes somewhat of a protective ourselves, or we feel that, you know, we can't reach beyond a certain point. I remember the very first time I moved into leadership, and when I sat around my very first ExCo meeting, I was the only woman around the table, and I was made to feel like I wasn't supposed to be there. I was made to feel as if there was this barrier between me and the other men that sat around that room. And a huge part of my journey in the last couple of years, and especially now as I sit as a CEO of an organization, my entire purpose is to make equality part of our DNA, right? But the ceiling it's definitely there, but it's there for whether it's to, you know, based on historical legacy issues, biases, unconscious biases, whatever it might be. But I think it's the more we learn from each other, the more mentorship we go through, the more we understand what that ceiling actually represents, whether it's something physical, whether it's something in our minds, whether it's our own prohibitors. It's about what do we actually do to shatter it. So whether I picked up the chair and I shattered it myself, or I slowly chip away at it and shatter it, it can be broken, and you can remove that barrier that exists. So it's a question of, do you want to rip the Band-Aid, or do you want to slowly chip away at it and go through it? And I think as long as you continue to do that and you start making that change, you're not just shattering it for yourself, you're shattering it for all of the other women around you that you represent or you work with or whatever it is. But we have to consciously and actively do it because it can be done. And I think that's a big thing. I mean, everybody on this call is probably an example of someone who's done that in their own right. And no matter how the barrier exists, it's a challenge for you and the challenge you've got to overcome, but totally doable. I'd say take the chair and throw it at it. It's the best way, do it one hit, or just slowly take a little file and plop away at it, and also will work absolutely perfectly.
Thank you, Raksha. That's a very inspiring and wonderful way to respond to the question, and I really appreciate what you've said. And I guess that gives us the opportunity to turn now to a woman who has indeed smashed the glass ceiling. Nolitha Fakude, who is the chairperson of the Minerals Council of South Africa, and who's also the chairperson of Anglo American. Those are very, very big. Those are very, very big titles, Nolitha. Those are very, very big positions to occupy. They are positions that are, you know, so deep in South African society. Positions that have almost always been filled by men. And you are a woman who has really been able to smash those ceilings. And I think it's very inspiring for all of us in the mining industry in particular, to be able to see a role model like yourself, not only being in with what you are doing with the role. I ask you, first of all, just to reflect a little how you've come to be working in the positions that you have, and what has enabled you, you know, to be able to occupy the positions that you do?
Well, Lael, good afternoon, and to my fellow panelists, good afternoon. First disclaimer, definitely the mining industry glass ceiling has been chipped and shattered by a lot of women and men who have been either chipping at it or throwing chairs at it, like Raksha is saying, and many others. And for me, I think I just happened to be fortunate that at the time when obviously I got into the role, that the nudge or the push on some of these cracks was deep enough for it to open. So I can never take the full credit for that. It's because truly there have been over the years a lot of women and organizations and others who have helped to make sure that the glass ceiling is broken. I think the big theme that is coming through from everyone is the fact that we have to be very intentional about what we do. If we're not intentional about changing the status quo, if we're not deliberate around what interventions we put in place to make sure that we open up opportunities for women, not only from a career perspective, but overall for women to come into business, into mining specifically, and find an environment and a culture that enables you to thrive and live to your full potential, then it's going to be difficult to deal with all these issues that we're talking about and the barriers that are there. So the barriers continue to be there. And through the Minerals Council work streams and then also the leadership platform that we created 3 years ago, Women in Mining Leadership Forum, with the CEOs being the allies, that was part of that intentionality to say, we've got to put this firmly on the agenda of the CEO, that as much as we're talking about safety as a critical agenda and other key strategic agendas, diversity, inclusion, as well as equity are also as important. And therefore, we need the role models, the leaders who are going to influence and shape and change the culture of their organizations, who will be able to be role models that say, I can mentor. And if you're a mentor, a sponsor, or a champion for women in our organization, you are our hero. If we say as an organization that safety, for example, is critical, we're not only just talking about safety as in the work that we do, but also the gender safety issue that we are now putting together, because it's as important as anything else. As a result, in fact, tomorrow with our National Day of Safety, we are for the first time talking not just only about the safety as pertaining to fatalities and also other risks at work, but we're also including the whole issue around harassment, gender-based violence, and other areas and issues that make it for women not to feel safe at work, like the fact that Raksha was still talking about the physical PPE stuff and physical safety issues. So all those issues are now being pulled together. And I think it's an opportunity that also we're leveraging to say, let's align our interventions and initiatives, support each other in such that then we are able to see greater impact and are able to make a difference. So that for me has been, I believe, the opportunity coming into the environment. Obviously, having been in different sectors, you know, I get to be a bit schizophrenic sometimes, trying to work out who am I exactly. I'm not a miner, really. I'm not a chartered accountant. I'm not an engineer. Any of these amazing intellectual roles and individuals. And I'm much more of a social scientist. And at the end of the day, but when we think about it, and how women have been able over the years to be trailblazers, and also to manage to do the wonderful things that everyone is doing. It's because for us as women, in terms of how we think through our careers and how we rise, it's completely different to how I think men reflect on these issues. Men will say, yeah, my family is important, but how the nitty-gritties of that work itself out when it comes to actually impacting your role,
Yes.
often up to the other spouse and partner. Whereas for a woman, you are actually really bringing your full self over and above just saying, I'm just raising kids, but it's the life cycle of your career and how you map that out, and how, as you do that, you make sure that you are still able to have meaning and also purpose, because women very much are driven by not just the money part only. Money is important. We all start off saying, I need to make money, put bread on the table. But then secondly, it's around meaning. What meaning is there for me in what I'm doing, and how can I add value with my family, with society, and others around me. And eventually it leads us to the point where we start finding the areas where we're saying, this is how I live my purpose, or I'm able to impact on others. And that's how I for over the years, most of us have been able to walk through and make sure that we partner with other women, we partner with other associations to make sure that the agenda for transformation when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion of women in business is a common agenda abroad, just across the spectrum.
So that we lift others as we rise.
Definitely, which is why the whole issue of how women rise. Women don't rise alone. We bring someone with us always. We lift as we rise, or we walk with others. We never walk alone. We walk, you call somebody and you walk with them. And it's important. It's an important trait that I believe that women also bring in leadership, because when we sit around that leadership table, I'm talking to my peers here who are leading organizations and institutions, you always ask the question, where are the others who are not represented here? So you become the voice of those who are not there, and not only their voice, you amplify the challenges that are being faced by the others who are not necessarily represented at the table. So we do it as we rise as women. And as we do that, we also make sure that it's not just only within your space, but also in other spaces. So just an example, on the recent discussions, Lael, we've been having, it's Women's Month, and we engage differently. Yesterday, I had the privilege of being part of a conversation with one of the legal bars. It's called the Bridge Group, with the bar, with the advocates and everybody. They've got the different groups. This one is called Bridge Group, and for the legal profession, this year it's the centenary celebration of when women were first allowed legally to become lawyers and practice law.
Amazing.
So for them, they are on this campaign and raising awareness, and we were comparing notes, and you realize that if you take away just the industry, but talk about what is common around the table in terms of what affects women in terms of career progression, and just being business leaders, because these are business leaders, even though they are advocates and attorneys, it's the same barriers that everyone faces. So it's important that we lean in and support each other as much as is possible, so that we're able to rise in a way that will shatter the glass ceiling.
Amazing. And as you say, and not only to focus on our own industry, but if one thinks of something, you've mentioned the legal profession, or even an industry like construction, which might face, quite similar conditions to the ones that we face in mining. I'm sure that there's a lot that we can learn from each other. Nolitha, maybe I can just say that I've had the privilege to sit in the Women in Mining Leadership Forum, and it's been amazing to me, the way in which you've really been able to really gather all of the leaders of the mining industry, men and women alike, and you've been able to, corral everybody into this effort. And I think that it's also been interesting to just watch the men in those forums. Many of the participants in the forum are men because they are CEOs, and still in the industry, most CEOs are men. And to see them, take on these issues. And I think it's been a real learning and growing experience for the men in the industry to begin to have to think about what it's like not to feel safe at work, and not only not to feel safe because of rock falls, but not to feel safe because of your colleagues, because you don't know if you're going to be harassed or attacked by your colleagues, for example. And just to see men, taking those issues on and growing their consciousness. And thank you also, Nolitha, for reminding us that that gender-based violence is first and foremost a safety issue. Women are not safe at work if they're exposed to gender-based violence. And we need PPE, but we also need an environment in which women do not have to feel afraid of their colleagues. And I think that's such an important part of the safety agenda in South Africa. And that gives me the opportunity to refer to one of the questions that's come into the Q&A from Juliet Choate. I hope Choate, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Juliet. Juliet is saying that she finds that in industries that are predominantly male, there is an effort to bring young women into the discipline. But once you've become part of the industry, there's a lack of adequate support. And then she goes on to say that often the problems that women face in industry have to do with the fact that there are harmful and predatory practices within the industry, and that women are particularly vulnerable because often they are, require employment, they have vulnerabilities in their career, and then they get exposed to harmful practices. So this really raises the whole question of the culture of the workplace, and particularly the culture of our industry, of the mining industry. How do we transform, not only at the level of committees and at the level of CEOs, but how do we transform the day-to-day lived culture of our industry in relation to sexual harassment, predatory practices, racism, bullying? How do we take these things on?
Yeah, they definitely, these unfortunately are still very much the vexing issues that we're dealing with, and in many ways, probably the most wicked problem that we face as an industry outside of safety. It's the one around the safety of women within the workplace. And as we have seen and heard, I always go to the Rio Tinto report that was published 2 years ago, and I admire them greatly for the courage to put it out there, because it also allowed us to have this conversation in an open way. And I say, if you take out the name Rio Tinto, unfortunately, I'm sure it's resonating with many other organizations, yes, globally and also in South Africa in terms of what is happening in the workplace. And there are three areas of intervention that we all need to be thinking about as leaders. One is the fact that if we are saying that part of the ESG strategy, the S1 being social, therefore diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important strategic issue, then it must be everybody's business in an organization to make sure that that particular pillar is dealt with appropriately. And we have obviously made sure that as part of our engagements through the Minerals Council and the work streams that we're talking about, the foundation measures, that those talk to the different issues, whether it's reaffirming the zero tolerance for gender-based violence, but also to the whole issue around initiating unconscious bias training to transform culture, because at the end of the day, the culture change it's about behavior. And unless we change behavior, until we role model the behavior that is required as leaders and everybody in the organization, we are not going to make a dent in this problem. And to do that, it's collaborations, it's partnerships, it's making sure that we work with the allies and our allies in this particular issue. It's not only labor. Labor is an important ally for us. It's also the men, it's all the stakeholders really within our environments. And we've got to make sure that we work through that process. The third area, for me, it's making sure that we think about this from a regulatory framework. I always say, your minimum compliance issue is about making sure that you do the right things, and those who need to be nudged, well, you've got the regulation. If you don't need nudging, regulation becomes your just minimum requirement. But over and above that, then you do the right things as an employer. And that particular issue for me has been amplified by the fact that with the extension, and it's a new code of practice that we saw come into play in 2020, 2021, I think, the Convention 190 from ILO, talking about bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, and also victimization in the workplace as the employer's responsibility to make sure that you mitigate against that. It's an important step that from a regulatory framework can strengthen our efforts to make sure that we have all the right interventions in place to say, even if you do the bullying and harassment, how do we then, as employers and partners, respond in such a way that makes it, I'll use the word victim, the victim feel that I am supported by the system. I am actually not only supported, but I am protected. The whole psychological safety issue comes in, because more often than not, the psychological safety around reporting what is happening or talking about what's happening to you is always not there. And as leaders, that's why I'm quite actually excited by the CEOs who are taking on this as part of their own commitment, because they are the ones who can engender that psychological safety in their own organizations to say, let's be open, let's support people who come out, and also make sure that we are very clear in how we deal with breaches when it comes to some of these issues. So it's going to be a multi-pronged approach that we would need to take to deal with these issues. But at the heart of it, it's going to be very much around changing the culture and making sure that the culture in the environment spews out to those people who really are not meant to be in our organizations. And that's the bottom line, truly.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Nolitha, for reminding us about the regulatory aspect of all of this. Because, I think what's so clear is that the struggle against sexual harassment, sexual violence in the workplace is not simply a nice to have. It's not something that we do only because we are good people or we're committed. This is absolutely a responsibility as an employer to provide an environment for employees that is free from violence, that is free from intimidation, in which people do not feel silenced, and neither should people feel that their careers would depend on them doing sexual favors for bosses, and that sort of thing. So these are very serious legal and regulatory responsibilities, as well as things that really just relate to our own ethics as human beings. Nolitha, you've also played an important role in championing the efforts to provide GBV support in mining communities. and never forgetting that the mining industry is not only about those of us who actually work in the industry, but also about the communities in which we operate. And that the message about preventing gender-based violence and supporting victims also has to go beyond the fence of the mine, beyond the boom gate, and into the communities in which we are operating. We're beginning to run out of time, but I want to just ask you one more question, if I may, that is also reflective of a question that's come through on the Q&A, and that's just something about your own journey. Perhaps you could just share with us what have been some of the important factors, or perhaps some of the important people that have enabled you to occupy really the highest, the apex point of our industry. What has been an important factor in enabling you as an individual to play the role that you have?
Okay, no, thanks, Lael. So when I reflect, because now it's more reflection than anything, I never planned out some of this. People think that you plan this to a T. No, 83 years later, you reflect on that journey. And for me, key around it has been having the sponsors, the champions and mentors who have along the way supported me in my career, and also just made sure that they give me the sense of confidence that I've earned the right to be where I am, whichever table I have found myself in. And it's an important factor, because I think, I'm not sure whether it was Raksha or even Simangele mentioning it, that part of our makeup as women, you come in and you're always second guessing yourself. There's always that voice of saying, do you think you can be here? Why do you think it's you? And all that. And because we were, and myself and many of our generation were the first who came into some of these roles purely because of time, having started working in 1990, you found yourself in these spaces. So you always ask yourself this question, because people are asking, and also you've got self-doubt. And the mentors and sponsors always would say, you've earned your place at the table, and also your voice counts. So the voice count issue for me has been the driver throughout, because I always say, I know I'm here because I'm a beneficiary of employment equity. I'm here representing the voice of the voiceless, because were it not for employment equity, I don't think I would have had opportunities that I've had, from Woolworths right up to Nedbank, Sasol, and Anglo American, over and above the fact that I have come with my own core competencies. But also, obviously, you've got the enabling legislation that supports you. You've got your sponsors and mentors, other women who have been very supportive, whether I knew them or didn't know them, across the country, would reach out, especially women in the financial services, the chartered accountants, because that was a field where there were more women, as we know, who were chartered accountants coming through, people like Cindy Zilwa, Tim Top, those are my peers, and we would reach to each other and talk about our experiences. And also, over and above that, being part of networks for me has been very important in my career. Networks, so like business associations. So I was a member of the Black Management Forum, being a member, branch chairperson, and then rose through the ranks of the organization. So the work that WIMSA, for instance, is doing, that becomes really, those are the networks that make sure that you've got a safe space as a woman when you are out of work, to talk about your experiences, learn about how best do you navigate the corporate sector, and more importantly, support other women as well who are going through the same journey. So it's a combination, your core competencies, mentors, sponsors, and others, And thirdly, making sure that you really work and collaborate and partner with others in your role and also with your career to make sure that you are able to support each other. And back to the point of lifting as you rise, because as you move along, you realize that you don't need your allies, and allies will come in all shapes and forms, and those are the people that support you. We come from a generation, most of us, where our sponsors and champions and mentors in the early days were white men. And for me, that has continued over the years, but also I've had Black women and also everyone across the spectrum really support my career and champion and mentor me along the way.
Well, thank you, Nolitha, for such wonderful answers to those questions, but also thank you for being such an important presence in our industry. I can really see the way in which you've made a point of using the offices that you occupy, to enable initiatives, to take on gender issues in a very, very intentional way, as you've mentioned, and also just for being such a, how can I put it, such a powerful presence in our industry that is really, I think, changing rapidly now, hopefully, as we go on. So,
like yourself.
Right.
Supporters like yourself, Lael, because when I came in, especially into the Minerals Council role, the people who had the blueprint, who had been around for a long time, were yourselves and others, and saying this is the work that has been done, and it also helps to unlock other people to come through, because the work that we're talking about specifically, which is very important, around bringing in the communities in the areas we're working in on gender-based violence, is the work that was spearheaded by people like yourself and others, and partnering with the NPA for the Tutuzela centers. Right. I mean, all that we needed to do was, again, to amplify that work and say, here's something that works, let's learn from each other, and rather than reinvent the wheel, make sure that we put our resources together to make a difference. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Nolitha. And yes, a great reminder that amplification is something that sometimes just requires just a little bit of effort, but can have a huge impact. It's a great term that you've used, and wonderful that you use your office in the way that you do. I'd like to just come back and give each of the panelists just a minute or two, just to offer us some closing remarks before I go on to Shannon. Rebecca, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Lael. It's been wonderful listening to Nolitha and Raksha and Smart today, and hearing, the positive moves that are going ahead in the industry. I just would like to touch on something which talks to what Nolitha was talking about, and Raksha also mentioning the fact that there's a safe space in Windsor. I believe that we don't talk about creating this safe space in the workplace for women as much as we should. That should become part of our talks on a daily basis in the workplace, maybe our toolbox talks, our safety talks. I'm certainly going to revisit our training material and see how we can incorporate that into the generics that we have for every single course. So thank you for prompting that. I really believe it's time that we start to use our voices. So for the people who've joined the webinar and who are listening and who want to be part of this movement to become more heard, you've seen now that there are several people around who can create that environment where you can feel safe to talk. So I think that's very valuable. Thank you.
Wonderful, Rebecca. And I think the more you can do unconscious bias training, the more you can train people to recognize intimidation, to recognize sexual harassment, to recognize bullying, to know what to do if you get bullied. What do you do if you get harassed? The more that we can all train each other, I think the better we'll all be doing. Thank you, Rebecca. Simangele, over to you. Closing remarks.
Okay, thank you so much, Lael. I think from my side, honestly, is that what I want to share with the ladies is that there are several platforms, there are several programs out there that deal with women empowerment, where we offer different kinds of support in our different areas. It's very important to empower yourself and know what exactly you want to do, where you want to participate, and obtain that kind of knowledge so that you do not miss out on these different programs. In our entity alone, with the budgets that we have for the company, we ensure that we have a set aside budget for supporting women-owned businesses, not only women-owned, but also specific to Black-owned businesses, Black women-owned businesses, because we understand the challenges that are faced by women in business, and we want to extend that support. It's mentorship programs that we offer, it's training, different training programs that we offer. It's actually ensuring that even with in our procurement space where we are targeting our different services providers or consultant, we target women-owned businesses. That's one of the things that we do as the company, to offer and extend and ensure that there are those opportunities for women to participate in. It starts with you, your commitment and where you want to be, and reach out and ensure that you get the kind of information for you to participate in those different programs. So we are here, and also for us to ensure that in our different areas, we identify those gaps where women can play a role in, and ensure that we close those gaps. We are in spaces where we can contribute and be influential. So let's utilize those spaces and ensure that we bring those programs, and any gaps that we identified, we ensure that those gaps are filled, because if we don't look out for each other, nobody will. So let's continue with the wonderful work that we're doing in this kinds of platform and others, where we ensure that we handhold each other. I'm not sure if there's a time to respond to a question. I didn't have the response in the Q&As. There was a question around opportunities for startups in RBID. That's where our work is. Certainly they are. We don't only support companies within our area. Obviously, there are different programs for everything. There are those where we target companies within the area to ensure that we uplift and improve and close those gaps in the needs of the communities where we operate in. But certainly, there are different programs. Actually, we do have an enterprise development program where we extend not only for local companies, but throughout the country. We advertise on those different opportunities. And if you see it's something that is relevant, you hand in your application, and you are supported if you do qualify on those requirements that we're looking for. So thank you so much. It has been an interesting one, and even though we're panelists, we learn ourselves. There's quite a lot of information that I've certainly taken from these wonderful ladies that I will take with me to my workplace and in other platforms where I participate in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simangele, and all the best with the wonderful work that you're doing there in Richards Bay. Raksha, Naidoo, over to you.
So as a closing, I think the theme that we adopted at WIMSA this year is to be bold, to be brave, and to be you. And I think that speaks a lot to what we're all talking about here, right? It's about being bold enough to challenge yourself, being bold enough to take risks in your career, being bold enough to push yourself forward and to use your voice for what you need to. Be brave enough to challenge biases, challenge discrimination, be brave enough to stand up against what's wrong, and ultimately be yourself throughout that journey. I don't think we need to become someone else. We don't need to become something else. I think that sometimes we also just need to learn to trust ourselves a lot more and trust, like Nolitha said, our competencies, our capabilities, and you've earned your spot there. So something for me that I've carried a lot, and I think we try and empower a lot with our WUMSA teams is be bold, be brave, and be you, because you're the greatest superpower that ever exists. So yeah, that's for me.
Fabulous, Raksha. That's a truly inspiring slogan. Be bold, be brave, be you. I think we all take that forward with us from this webinar.
Okay, I'm glad.
Fakude, thank you, Raksha. Nolitha, Fakude, a last word from yourself, please.
Be bold, be brave, be you. That's my last one. I say amen to that, Raksha. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been wonderful to spend this hour, a little bit over an hour with you all. And thank you to those who've participated on this wonderful panel. Really, I think South Africa is full of such wonderful people and such wonderful women. And we can see that there's opportunity out there. There are great things to be done. There's opportunity to contribute. There are opportunities to help lift other women. And we really are in a very exciting environment. Whatever problems we face in our country, we live in a country that is just full of fascination, full of opportunity, full of the opportunity to make a difference. And so glad and grateful to be part of this wonderful time spent together today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Shannon. Shannon, over to you.
Thanks very much. I really feel very inspired and I really enjoyed that discussion. So thank you very much, everyone. That does bring us to the end of our webinar. I'd like to say thank you to our facilitator, Lael Bethlehem, for enabling a robust and engaging discussion. As I said, I've been inspired by this empowered panel. Thank you so much to our panelists, Rebecca Sands from Metskill, Simangele Mvelase from Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone, Raksha Naidoo from Women in Mining South Africa, and Nolitha Fakude from the Minerals Council South Africa. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Metskill, the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone, SAB, AMOS, NG, and Women in Mining South Africa for their support in making this webinar possible. Finally, thank you to the attendees for taking the time to join us in this discussion on women in business, where we unpacked how to grow the role and presence of women in South African businesses. Our next webinar takes place on the 20th of September at 2 p.m. and will focus on decarbonisation in mining. The link to register for that event will be shared soon. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course. And if you have any additional questions, please be in touch. You can reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. Thank you all very much for your time and goodbye.
And thank you to Creamer Media for getting us all together today. Thank you.
Only a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Indeed. Thank you. Bye.